The checklist is in a structure of 3 layers. We have a one-page overview at the top, which is mainly serves as just a reminder. We then have a 7-page version which has more details and which probably will be the version that most people will use. And then we have a full set of guidance which has examples and references. Before using the checklist, we strongly encourage you to know your target audience, to think about who it is you're trying to target. Think about things like what kind of topics they're likely to be interested in, whether they're likely to want additional information that may be very important for them. How much time are they likely to have? Do they have lots of time to read your product, or are they in a rush? What languages are most appropriate for your target audience? What kind of resources do they have? Do they have easy access to the internet, for instance, or a big file is going to be a problem? What are their literacy skills like, their numeracy skills? Are they familiar with medical terminology, or is this going to be new to them? What kind of sources are they likely to regard as credible and trustworthy? And do they expect recommendations? As you know, Cochrane does not give recommendations, but this is something that you might want to deal with actively if your target audience is a target audience that would expect recommendations. So, as a general rule, you need to, before you make any product, you need to think about who your target audience is. So, the checklist has 18 items, and I'm going to go through all 18. So if you're falling asleep, you can count how many I have left before I stop talking. Item 1 is, have you involved your target audience or sought their feedback? And when you look at the long version, you'll see that we have different ambition levels for seeking feedback, everything from asking a friend to carrying out a full-blown survey. But that's definitely a very important item that you need to think about. Item 2, have you used plain language? And what constitutes plain language really depends on your target audience. And you'll have to adapt what you mean by plain language to who your target audience is. But there are some things that we can say in general across all target audiences, such as use the active voice, keep sentences and paragraphs short, avoid abbreviations whenever possible, avoiding research jargon. If you have to use medical terms, to explain these and to use them consistently, etc. But we have some tips about things that are general, but you need to adapt this to your audience. Whoops. Item 3, have you used words in your title that your target audience is likely to search for and recognize and find relevant? This is an example from Evidently Cochrane by Cochrane UK. No, sorry, it's not from Evidently Cochrane, but it is from Cochrane UK. And in this case, they've made 2 different blog shots on the same review, but for different audiences. So on the left-hand side, you have a blog shot which is designed for midwives, where they refer to suspected fetal macrosomia. And on the right-hand side, they've changed the text to adapt to an audience which is primarily parents, where they referred to babies thought to be very big. So same review, very different heading because of the terms that they think their audience is likely to be searching for. Item 4, have you communicated to your target audience that this product is relevant for them? This is very much based on our own and other people's experiences of looking at research information and not identifying it as something that's relevant for them. And we suggest a few different approaches to solving this problem in the checklist about how you might indicate to your target audience that this is written for them. Item 5, have you structured the content so people can find key messages, then access more detail if they want? So start with the key messages and then allow people to dig down. And this allows people to find what they want to find, but it also ensures transparency. Item 6, have you made the content easy for people to quickly scan and read? So on the left-hand side, you'll see an example, the before example, where there's very little white space, very compact text. And on the right-hand side, you'll see an example where we've tried to break it up using headings, using white space. Have you shown that the evidence involves real people? This is a quote from one of the studies we included in the background material. I think it's a typical research site, lifeless, there's no warmth. And that's quite a common response to scientific information. So again, we've tried to come up with solutions to how you can try and remind the reader that actually this review is about real people. Item 8, have you indicated the type of population, intervention, comparison, and main outcomes that the review looked at? I don't think that needs further explanation, but again, we discussed that in more detail in the checklist. Item 9, have you stated that this information is from a systematic review? Many products don't actually make this clear, and it does become confusing for the reader if they think they're reading about an individual study. Have you specified how up-to-date the review is? I think this is a must for the transparency of the information. People need to know how recent this research actually is, or this review actually is. Item 11, have you avoided misleading presentations and interpretations of the effects? I mean, we could have a full webinar just on this item, and it's way too detailed to go into, and we strongly recommend that you look at the guidance here. But we're talking about things like making sure you report the most important benefits and harms, not just the ones that have interesting results. Reporting all of your benefits and harms in the same way. Deciding whether it's important to specify the time point when the outcome was measured, which could have a big impact on people's interpretation. Focusing on important results or important differences rather than statistically significant differences. And not confusing a lack of evidence of effect with no effect, which is a very common problem in a lot of our products. Item 12, if you have used numbers to present the findings, which you may not have you used absolute numbers and labeled numbers clearly? Item 13, have you described the certainty of the evidence? Again, a very common omission from a lot of our products. Item 14, have you presented the findings in more than one way? So in this particular example, we're presenting the results both in terms of words and in a table using numbers. And this allows people, on the one hand, to choose which type of presentation format they prefer, but it also lets people check whether they've actually understood the results correctly. Item 15. Again, quite a big topic, and not something we can do justice here, but where the topic or findings may be upsetting to your reader or controversial or disappointing, have you handled this sensitively? Item 16, another issue tied to transparency. Have you made it clear that the review was prepared by Cochrane and who prepared the dissemination product? Item 17, is it easy for people to find information about who the review authors are, how they were funded, and any conflict of interest? Again, this is an issue of transparency. And finally, item 18, have you avoided giving recommendations? And we, again, discussed this in some detail in the checklist. And as I said earlier, we are not supposed to give recommendations in the Cochrane review, but this is something that needs to be dealt with sensitively, as people may be expecting it, and there are different ways of giving people evidence, but making it clear that we're not making the decision for them. So those are the 18 items, very, very briefly. We have been asked many times whether or not it's realistic to use this checklist on very brief products, such as blog shots. And we've worked with Cochrane UK and the blog shot design to test whether or not it works and what we can do to tweak both the blog shots and the checklist to make sure that it actually is possible. And it is possible to meet all of the requirements in the checklist. So this is a tweet of a blog shot. And it is possible to meet the checklist requirements through the use of links, but we're not saying that you should always use brief products. Obviously, you're very, very welcome to make much longer products also. So just to finalize before I hand over to Stephanie, remember that the checklist is a set of principles. The checklist isn't a set of solutions about how you should be making your dissemination product. It's not suggesting you do blog shots or podcasts or press releases. It's saying that if you do a knowledge translation product, that product needs to meet these principles. Again, as I said at the beginning, level 1 is really only meant as a reminder. We would strongly recommend that you familiarize yourself with levels 2 and 3. You're quite a mixed group, and I'm sure some of the items we've gone through are very easy for you to apply and to check off, and they're probably things you do already. There may be items here that you think are more difficult or harder to understand, and we'd suggest that you pick the items that you think are the most unfamiliar and use that as a starting point for your professional development. So I'm going to come back to questions and comments, but I'm going to hand over to Stephanie now so she can talk about the resources that we have developed for the checklist.
Great, thank you, Claire. Can you just confirm that you can hear me on the microphone? Yep, perfect. All right, so as you can tell, it's a vast checklist. There's a lot of information in there, and your experience on how you apply that checklist to your various dissemination products will be varied. So in light of that, and in an attempt to make it as easy for you as possible to use this checklist in your work, we are developing and in the process of developing a number of resources and capacity building opportunities for people to use this checklist. And so I'll highlight some of the resources that we're creating. So the checklist itself, along with the guidance document and other resources on dissemination products, are now available on our Cochrane training site. So I will send this link around after, so you don't have to worry about scrambling to write it down right now. And in addition to all of that information that's on our training site, we're hoping to develop more webinars such as this one in 2020. So that would look like a webinar program that's focused on dissemination and knowledge translation. And that would be how to apply items or groups of items within the checklist that you've just seen. Those topics might also be on different types of dissemination products and how to create them, as well as creating different dissemination products for different target audiences and what considerations might need to be made for that. And in addition to these ideas that we have of what this webinar program could look like, we really are looking to you to tell us what would be helpful to you in your work, whether you're just at the beginning of your dissemination journey and you'd like to explore more on how to do dissemination, which products to choose, how to work with particular audiences, or whether you're further along in your dissemination journey and perhaps would like some more tailored or advanced guidance. So at the end of this webinar, actually, we'll be sending out an evaluation survey where you can tell us what might be helpful to you for future webinars. Can I have the next slide, please?
Yep.
Other resources that we are in the process of creating to help you use this checklist are an online learning and interactive version of the checklist and guidance. So right now it exists as a PDF document, and we're in the process of making that more interactive so that you can go on the site and play around with the different items and link directly to resources that can help you use various checklist items. The next would be providing increased support for individual dissemination products. And what that could look like could be a dissemination kit or specific guidance on perhaps how to create an infographic or apply this checklist to an infographic, for example. So we're looking to provide some more specific support. And the last is that as people start to use this checklist in their work, and as we start to get examples of what it looks like when it's applied in practice, and some of the learnings that people have, and some of the results and the benefits that people are seeing from perhaps applying this checklist, we'll be able to develop some case studies of innovative or successful products that have been developed so that you can use those to guide you in your development of dissemination products. Because we recognize that there's a lot of excellent dissemination work and knowledge translation work happening across Cochrane. And so our goal would be to gather that information together so that you can learn from your peers on some innovative and successful dissemination work. And the last resource that we are in the process of organizing will be a series of regional training sessions. So you'll be able to learn how to use this checklist and how to do your dissemination work with this checklist in a face-to-face environment. And specifically, it will be from your peers. So we'll be training a cohort of trainers from across Cochrane to be able to provide support to you in applying this checklist to your work. And this is just a snapshot of some of the resources and capacity building opportunities that we've thought of that might be helpful. But again, we'll be looking to you to guide us and give us some ideas and tips based on what has been helpful to you in the past or what you'd like to see from us in the future.